A soldier returned home at dawn after months of overseas duty, only to be shocked by the piercing cries of his child echoing from the basement. When he broke down the door and discovered what was happening to her, his world collapsed. Heavy raindrops pelted the windows as Staff Sergeant Carlos Rivera pulled into the driveway he hadn't seen in 5 months. 5 long months deployed overseas, counting down days until he could hold his 6-year-old daughter Maya again. 5 months of believing she was safe with his new wife Victoria. His military duffel bag felt heavy as he shouldered it, fumbling for the house key. The front door swung open silently. Expensive perfume and fresh flowers filled the air, scents that seemed wrong for a home with a young child. New furniture filled the living room. Crystal vases sat on polished tables. Everything looked perfect, sterile, unlived in. "Carlos?" Victoria's voice drifted from the kitchen, startled but trying to sound pleased. She emerged wearing a silk robe and diamond earrings he'd never seen before. "You're home early." Victoria, the woman Carlos had married 8 months after his first wife died. She was younger, had worked at the base medical center, and convinced him Maya needed a mother figure. "Where's Maya?" Carlos asked, scanning the room. Victoria's smile flickered. "She's napping downstairs. Poor thing exhausted herself playing yesterday." Maya never napped during the day. Before Carlos could question this, a muffled scream rose from below their feet. "Help me! Please, somebody help!" Carlos's military instincts kicked in. He pushed past Victoria and headed for the basement door, locked with a deadbolt he'd never installed. "Carlos, wait! I can explain!" Victoria started, but he was already throwing his full weight against the door. The wood splintered. Carlos thundered down the wooden steps into the dim basement. What he found would haunt him forever. Maya was huddled in the corner of a bare storage room, on a thin mattress on concrete. She wore a torn nightgown hanging off her skeletal frame. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, blonde hair matted. Dark circles ringed her eyes, lips cracked from dehydration. His little girl, once chubby and healthy, was now skin and bones. Bruises in various stages of healing covered her arms and legs. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you real? Victoria said you were never coming back." Carlos collapsed beside his daughter, hands shaking as he touched her face. She flinched, then leaned into his palm desperately. "I'm real, baby girl. Daddy's here now." His voice cracked as he wrapped his jacket around her. Victoria's footsteps echoed behind him. "Carlos, you don't understand. She's been impossible to manage, throwing tantrums, breaking things." Carlos turned to face his wife with the same cold focus he'd used hunting enemies overseas. "My daughter is starving. She's covered in bruises. She's been locked in a basement." Victoria's composure cracked. "She's manipulative. Children lie. Liar." Maya's voice cut through the excuses. "You hit me. You locked me down here. You threw away Daddy's letters." Carlos's jaw clenched. "What letters, Maya?" "The ones with pictures. Victoria burned them. She said you forgot about me, that you had a new family now." The psychological torture had been as systematic as the physical abuse. Victoria had convinced his daughter she was abandoned, unloved, forgotten. "Where's the money I've been sending?" Carlos demanded. $2,000 a month for 5 months. Victoria's face flushed red as he continued. "I see new furniture, new jewelry, a luxury car. Where's my daughter's share?" From upstairs came Derek, Victoria's 16-year-old son. He took in the scene and muttered, "Oh shit. Look, man, I told her this was messed up." "Shut up, Derek," Victoria snapped. But Derek was already confessing. "She made me help sometimes, made me carry food down when the kid was being punished, made me lie to neighbors who asked why they never saw Maya outside." The systematic abuse became clear. Victoria had tested boundaries, realized no one was monitoring Maya, then escalated her cruelty. Carlos carried Maya upstairs and called 911. "This is Staff Sergeant Carlos Rivera. I need police and child protective services immediately. Child abuse situation requiring intervention." Within 20 minutes, the street filled with police cars and ambulances. Maya was rushed to the hospital while Carlos gave his statement to Detective Walsh. "In 15 years, Detective Walsh said as Victoria was led away in handcuffs, "This level of systematic cruelty is among the worst I've seen." Dr. Chen documented severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple healed fractures, and psychological trauma. "Your daughter is a fighter," he told Carlos. "Physically, she'll recover. Emotionally, that will take time." Victoria's financial records showed she'd stolen Carlos's support payments for luxury items while Maya starved. School records revealed Victoria had withdrawn Maya, claiming homeschooling to hide the abuse. The legal proceedings were swift. Victoria received 10 years in prison for child abuse, neglect, and fraud. Derek got juvenile detention and counseling. But for Carlos, real victory was measured in Maya's healing. Recovery was difficult. Maya had night terrors, hoarded food, and apologized constantly. Dr. Santos, her psychologist, explained these were normal trauma responses. Teaching her she's unconditionally loved will take patience. Breakthrough moments came gradually. The first time Maya asked for water without apologizing. The first laugh without fear. The first peaceful sleep. Mrs. Rodriguez, their neighbor, helped by teaching Maya to garden. Flowers need both sunshine and rain to grow, she told Maya. Hard times don't break us, they make us stronger. The basement was sealed permanently. Carlos created a bright bedroom filled with books and toys that Maya helped design. Community support poured in, fundraisers, therapy funds, and other military families offering help. Maya's recovery progressed slowly but surely. Her drawings evolved from dark images to bright scenes with flowers and sunshine. She began asking questions, showing her natural curiosity returning. "Daddy," she said one evening, "do you think bad people can become good people?" Carlos considered carefully. People can choose to change if they want to, but we protect ourselves and help others who need it. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "I want to help other scared kids like I was." 1 year later, they planted a garden together. As they worked with the seeds, Maya asked, "Will you teach me to be strong like you?" Carlos smiled, watching his daughter tend each seedling. "You're already the strongest person I know. You survived something that would break most adults." Their garden bloomed with vibrant colors. Maya would sit among the flowers, reading and drawing pictures of her new life. Her laughter now filled their home with joy. Their story became a beacon of hope, proof that love, patience, and courage could overcome even the darkest circumstances. Every time Maya's flowers bloomed, they reminded everyone that sometimes the most beautiful growth comes after the deepest pain. Some battles aren't fought on foreign battlefields. Sometimes the most important fight happens at home, defending those who cannot defend themselves. And sometimes the greatest victory is teaching a broken heart how to trust again. If this story moved you, remember there are children everywhere who need someone to notice their silence and speak up for them. Be that voice, because every child deserves someone who will fight for them when they cannot fight for themselves. A soldier came home and heard his daughter screaming. What he saw inside made him break down. A soldier returned home in the middle of the night after a long deployment, only to be jolted by the sudden blood-curdling scream of his daughter coming from inside the house. When he rushed into the room and saw what lay before him, he was paralyzed. A fine mist fell over the suburban houses. The dim yellow light from windows fogged with condensation flickered through the windshield, making Sergeant Michael Torres squint as he turned into the narrow driveway leading to his home. It had been nearly 4 months since he last held his daughter, nearly 4 months stationed at a forward operating base overseas. No letters, no photos, just one objective: finish the mission, come home. His rain-soaked backpack slapped against his back, left hand gripping the strap, right hand reaching for the spare key still hidden under the porch light. The door opened without a sound. A wave of synthetic fragrance hit him, lavender and lemon scents he never used in the house. The ceiling glowed softly under a row of white LED lights. The couch had been reupholstered. A candle burned steadily on the dining table. "Michael?" Rebecca's voice called out from the kitchen, surprised though not exactly unsettled. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out. "I didn't think you'd be back today." Rebecca, the woman Michael met 18 months after his first wife died in a car crash. She was nearly 8 years his junior, once worked at a small daycare center near the base. They'd married after 6 months, partly because 7-year-old Luna needed a woman in the house, and partly because Michael believed he was ready to start over. Michael gave a small nod. "Got early leave. Thought I'd surprise you." Rebecca smiled, brief and soft. "Luna will be thrilled. Where is she?" Michael set his backpack down near the door, eyes scanning the room quickly. There was no sign of a child having played there that day. No tiny shoes, No familiar stuffed animal draped over the arm of the couch. Everything was too neat, too still. She went to bed. Played a lot today. Wore herself out, Rebecca said, turning her back to him, her voice steady. Michael didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly toward the stairs. He paused on the landing. Luna's room was dark, the door closed. No sound came from inside. Then suddenly a scream tore through the air. "Daddy!" Without missing a beat, Michael lunged forward. His hand grabbed the doorknob. It was locked. He stepped back half a pace, braced himself, and kicked hard. The door flew open. Light from the hallway spilled into the room. Inside, Luna was curled up in the corner, her face streaked with tears. Her nightgown was wrinkled. A faint red mark stood out on her left cheek like it had just been made. Rebecca was standing barely 2 steps from the child, still holding a small pillow as if she had just thrown it onto the bed. For a few seconds, all 3 of them stood frozen in silence. Michael stepped forward and dropped to his knees beside Luna. She recoiled slightly when he reached out and touched her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. She just sat there, eyes staring blankly past him. She was messing around, running in the room, slipped and fell, then screamed. "I was just about to handle it," Rebecca said. Her voice was shaky, but trying hard not to be. Michael didn't look at her. He gently pulled Luna toward him, checking the back of her neck, an old bruise. Her little hands were ice cold. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her, holding her close. "You told me she was asleep," Michael said, eyes still fixed on Luna. Rebecca's voice turned stiff. She was asleep at the time. Michael picked Luna up. She didn't respond. Her arms hung limp, her head resting on his shoulder like she didn't have any strength left. A single tear slid silently down her cheek, soaking into Michael's collar. He didn't wipe it away. He turned. Jake and Mrs. Sandra were standing at the top of the stairs. Jake asked, "What happened?" "All I heard was a scream." Michael didn't answer. He walked steadily down the stairs, holding Luna in his arms. He passed Rebecca, who moved to block him but didn't dare. In the living room, Michael grabbed the throw blanket off the couch and gently covered his daughter. He laid her down on the long sofa. Then he turned back, facing the 3 of them frozen in place. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low and firm, like a command from a military officer. No one said a word. Michael walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. There was no carton of special almond milk, the kind Luna had to drink because she couldn't handle regular dairy. None of the familiar foods she liked were there. He looked around the kitchen. The little plastic cup shaped like a butterfly, his daughter's favorite, was nowhere to be found. He went back to the couch. Luna was still lying there, eyes open, silent. Michael sat down and leaned in close. "Talk to me. What happened?" He kept his voice soft. Luna pressed her lips together and shook her head. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the first thing he said wasn't a word of comfort. "From now on, no one goes into your room except me. You understand?" Luna gave a faint nod, then whispered, "Are you leaving again?" Michael didn't answer right away. That question, sharp and sudden, cut through his chest like a blade. "No," he said firmly. "This time I'm staying. I won't let anyone hurt you again." And in that moment, Michael had no way of knowing that the promise he had just made, a father's final vow, would become the beginning of a pain so cruel he couldn't have imagined it in his darkest thoughts. Luna had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room and stayed there all night, her head resting against Michael's arm. Every now and then she stirred slightly in her sleep, but didn't make a sound. Michael hadn't slept at all. He kept his hand on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on her tiny face where the red mark on her cheek had faded to a lighter shade. When the sky began to lighten with dawn, he gently carried her upstairs without saying a word to anyone. He turned on the bedroom light to its dimmest setting, tucked the blanket around her, then pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Sliding his hand under the edge of the blanket, he quietly checked her joints, elbows, calves, wrists, the base of her neck, each movement careful not to wake her. Just below her left wrist was a bruise, greenish-purple turning yellow around the edges, the shape indistinct but still there. Near the nape of her neck, close to her hairline, there was a faint round mark like an old scratch or a fingernail press. Michael stopped breathing for a few seconds, slowly pulled his hand back, stood up, and walked quietly to the kitchen. Neighbors began gathering outside, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Pellin from next door appeared with her husband Tom. The elderly couple had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years and had watched Isabella play in the yard before David's deployment. "Dear Lord," Mrs. Helen gasped when she saw Isabella's condition. "That poor child. I knew something was wrong. I heard crying so many nights, but Patricia always said she was just having nightmares." Other neighbors nodded in agreement. They had all suspected something was amiss, but had hesitated to interfere in family business. Now, faced with the evidence of systematic abuse, their collective guilt was palpable. Tom spoke up, his voice gruff with emotion. "I seen that girl digging through our trash cans early in the morning, looking for food. Thought it was strange behavior. But Patricia always had an explanation. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Isabella had been systematically starved, abused, and psychologically tormented, while Patricia lived comfortably off military support payments. The community had suspected but failed to act, leaving a child to suffer in silence. David's phone buzzed, a text from his army buddy Carlos, who worked in military police. "Heard you were coming home. Everything okay?" David quickly typed back, "Need immediate help. Child abuse situation. Bring backup." Within 30 minutes, police cars and social services vehicles filled the quiet suburban street. Patricia's confident facade crumbled as she realized the magnitude of her situation. She began spinning elaborate lies, claiming Isabella was mentally disturbed and prone to self-harm. But the evidence was overwhelming. Detective Sarah Rodriguez, who specialized in child abuse cases, took one look at Isabella and immediately called for a medical team. "This child needs immediate attention," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "She's severely malnourished and showing clear signs of prolonged abuse." The medical examination revealed the full extent of Isabella's suffering. Dr. Jennifer Walsh documented multiple healed fractures, chronic malnutrition, and clear evidence of repeated physical trauma. "In 20 years of pediatric medicine," she told David privately, "I've rarely seen such systematic abuse of a child." The investigation moved quickly once the authorities became involved. Patricia's financial records showed she had been stealing David's support payments while providing minimal care for Isabella. Bank statements revealed spending on luxury items, vacations, and expensive gifts for her own children, while Isabella was denied basic necessities. Isabella's school records showed a pattern of unexplained absences that coincided with visible injuries. Teachers had filed reports expressing concern, but Patricia had deflected with stories about Isabella being clumsy and accident-prone. Most damning were the recordings David had captured during his surveillance. Patricia's voice filled with venom as she called Isabella worthless and unwanted. Kevin and Marcus joining in the psychological torture, threatening her with invented monsters and promising that her father would never return. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Patricia was charged with child abuse, neglect, fraud, and theft of military benefits. Her sons faced charges for their participation in the psychological abuse. The evidence was so overwhelming that all three pled guilty rather than face a trial. Judge Margaret Thompson, a veteran of family court, showed no mercy during sentencing. "Mrs. Patricia Reyes," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "you were entrusted with the care of a vulnerable child whose father was serving our country. Instead of providing love and protection, you systematically tortured that child while stealing money meant for her care." Patricia received 8 years in prison. Kevin and Marcus, despite their youth, were sentenced to juvenile detention and mandatory psychological counseling. The court also ordered them to pay full restitution of the stolen support payments. But for David, the real victory wasn't measured in prison sentences or financial restitution. It was measured in the slow, patient work of healing his daughter's broken spirit. The recovery process was long and difficult. Isabella had been so thoroughly traumatized that she struggled with basic trust. She would hoard food in her bedroom, convinced that meals might be taken away as punishment. She would apologize constantly for the smallest actions, afraid that any mistake might result in abandonment or abuse. Dr. Maria Santos, the child psychologist who worked with Isabella, explained that these were normal responses to prolonged trauma. Isabella learned to survive in an environment where love was conditional, and any action could result in punishment, she told David. Teaching her that she's unconditionally loved and safe will take time and incredible patience. The breakthrough moments came gradually. The first time Isabella asked for a second helping at dinner. The first time she laughed at one of David's silly jokes without looking around nervously to make sure no one was angry. The first time she fell asleep without checking multiple times that her bedroom door was unlocked. Mrs. Helen, the neighbor who had suspected something was wrong, became instrumental in Isabella's recovery. She taught Isabella to bake cookies, to plant flowers in a small garden, and most importantly, to understand that mistakes were learning opportunities rather than crimes requiring punishment. "When I was your age," Mrs. Helen told Isabella one afternoon as they watered tomato plants, "my grandmother taught me that flowers don't grow straight toward the sun immediately. They grow a little each day, sometimes bending in the wind, sometimes getting knocked down by storms. But they always keep reaching for the light." Isabella absorbed this wisdom with the intensity of a child who had been denied gentle guidance for too long. "Even when they get hurt, especially when they get hurt," Mrs. Helen confirmed, "that's when they need the most care to grow strong again." The storage closet where Isabella had been imprisoned was completely transformed. David removed everything that could remind her of that dark period and converted the space into a bright art studio where she could draw, paint, and simply be a child again. Community support flowed in once the truth became known. Isabella's teacher, who had suspected abuse but felt powerless to act, worked with her throughout the summer to prepare her for returning to school. The local police department organized a fund to help with her medical and therapy expenses. Other military families reached out, offering support and understanding from their own experiences. Isabella's recovery wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others, filled with nightmares or sudden fears triggered by unexpected sounds or situations. But with each passing week, David could see his daughter's true personality beginning to emerge from beneath the layers of trauma. She was artistic, intelligent, and surprisingly resilient. Her drawings evolved from dark, cramped spaces to bright, open landscapes filled with sunshine and flowers. She began talking more, asking questions about everything, from why the sky was blue to what different animals ate. "Daddy," she said one evening, as he tucked her into her new bed in their new apartment, "do you think the flowers in our garden miss their old home?" David's heart clenched at the metaphor. "What do you think, sweetheart?" "I think maybe they're happier now because they have someone who waters them and makes sure they get enough sunlight." The wisdom in her simple observation took David's breath away. His daughter was healing, learning to trust again, and beginning to understand that she deserved love and care simply because she existed. 6 months after Patricia's arrest, Isabella had gained 15 pounds and grown 2 inches. Her laughter returned in waves, first tentative giggles, then full-throated joy that filled their home with life. She made friends at her new school and even joined the children's choir, her voice clear and sweet as she sang songs about hope and new beginnings. The final test came when Isabella received a letter from Patricia in prison. The letter was full of apologies and claims that she had never meant to hurt anyone. David let Isabella read it, then asked what she wanted to do with it. Isabella folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small box with her other important papers. "I want to keep it," she said, "not because I forgive her yet, but because someday I might. And if that day comes, I want to remember how far we've both traveled." The maturity in her response showed David that his daughter hadn't just survived her trauma. She had learned from it. She was developing compassion and wisdom that would serve her well throughout her life. 1 year later, David and Isabella planted a garden together in the backyard of their new home. As they worked side by side, Isabella asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "Daddy, do you think people can change, even the bad ones?" David considered his answer carefully. "I think people can choose to change if they really want to. But the most important thing is that we protect ourselves and help others who need it." Isabella nodded thoughtfully, then carefully placed a small sunflower seed in the rich soil. "I hope our flowers grow big and strong," she said. "I want everyone to see them and know that beautiful things can grow even after bad things happen." As David watched his daughter nurture new life from the earth, he knew that they had both found their way back to each other. The trauma would always be part of their story, but it no longer defined them. They had survived the storm and emerged stronger, ready to help others who might be fighting similar battles. Their story became a beacon of hope in their community, proof that love, patience, and courage could overcome even the darkest circumstances. And every time Isabella's sunflowers bloomed, they served as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful growth comes after the deepest pain. Some battles aren't fought with weapons or on foreign soil. Sometimes the most important fight is the one that happens at home, in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply teaching a broken heart how to trust again. If this story moved you, remember that there are children everywhere who need someone to notice their pain, to speak up for them, and to show them that they deserve love and protection. Be that voice. Be that hero. Because every child deserves someone who will fight for them when they cannot fight for themselves.